The people of Willow Creek believed they knew Clara Bennett's story. They saw a woman standing alone on her porch every evening. They saw the gray beginning to appear in her hair. They saw a widow who had spent years living quietly on a small farm outside town, and they decided something without ever asking her. They decided Clara Bennett's chance at love was over. At her age, she should stop dreaming, people whispered. Some chapters are meant to end. Clara heard those words, she always did. But what nobody knew was that behind her calm smile was a heart that still wondered one thing: was it truly too late to be loved again? Or had she simply been waiting for the right person to find her? Clara Bennett was 46 years old when she stopped expecting surprises from life. 5 years earlier, she had buried her husband, Thomas. He was not a rich man, he never owned a large ranch or had a famous name, but he had given Clara something money could never buy. He made her feel important. When Thomas was alive, their small farmhouse felt warm. After he was gone, every room felt bigger, every morning felt quieter. For years, Clara kept herself busy because being busy was easier than admitting she was lonely. She repaired fences. She planted vegetables, she took care of the animals, she did everything herself. Not because she wanted to prove she was strong, because life had taught her that depending on someone could lead to heartbreak, so she built a wall around her heart. And she convinced herself she did not need anyone to tear it down. The first time Clara met Daniel Carter, she did not know he would change her life. She only saw a stranger standing outside the general store. He was a man in his early 50s. His coat was old, his boots were covered in dust, he looked like someone who had traveled many miles. But there was something different about him. His eyes carried the same loneliness Clara saw in her own reflection. Daniel walked into the store and asked the owner, "Do you know where Walter Hayes' ranch is?" Clara looked up. "Walter's ranch is north of town." Daniel turned toward her. "Thank you, ma'am." His voice was calm, respectful, then he walked away. Clara forgot about him, at least she thought she did. 2 days later, Clara found Daniel struggling beside a broken wagon near her property. A wheel had come loose. He was trying to fix it alone. She watched for a moment, then she walked closer. "You are tightening the wrong bolt." Daniel looked up. For a second he seemed surprised, then he smiled. "And you know how to fix wagons?" Clara crossed her arms. "I know enough to recognize when someone is making a mistake." Daniel laughed quietly. "Most people would have just walked away. Most people probably enjoy watching others struggle." Daniel studied her face. There was something behind her words, something deeper. "You sound like someone who has done a lot of struggling herself." Clara looked away. "You ask too many questions for a stranger, and you answer too many for someone who does not like talking." For the first time in years, Clara almost smiled, almost. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became part of Willow Creek. He worked at Walter Hayes' ranch, he helped repair fences, he fixed broken tools, he never asked for attention, he simply helped. And that was what caught Clara's attention. One morning, she saw Daniel repairing an old neighbor's fence. The man tried to pay him. Daniel refused. "You helped me when I first came here," Daniel said. The old man looked confused. "I never helped you." Daniel smiled. "You gave me directions." The man laughed. "That was nothing." Daniel nodded. "Maybe, but sometimes small things matter." Clara watched from a distance. She realized something. Daniel was not kind because people were watching. He was kind because that was who he was. Slowly, they started spending more time together, not because either of them planned it. It just happened. Sometimes Daniel stopped by her farm to bring supplies. Sometimes Clara shared coffee with him on the porch. Their conversations were simple, but they mattered. One evening, Daniel asked, "Have you always lived here?" Clara looked toward the fields. "No, where were you before?" She smiled sadly. "Young." Daniel looked at her. She continued. "When I was young, I thought life would happen exactly the way I imagined. And did it? No." She looked at the sunset. "But maybe life is not about getting everything you wanted. What is it about?" Clara thought for a moment. "Learning to appreciate what you still have." Daniel became quiet. Because he understood those words more than anyone. One night while sitting outside her house, Clara noticed the wooden box Daniel always carried. She had seen it many times, but but she never asked. Until now, what is inside? Daniel looked at the box. For a moment, sadness crossed his face. My wife's letters. Clara became quiet. I am sorry, Daniel nodded. Her name was Emily. You miss her every day. Clara looked down. She understood that kind of loss. Daniel opened the box slightly. Before she died, she asked me to deliver these letters to her sister. Did you find her? Not yet. Clara looked at him. Then why are you here? Daniel closed the box. Because I needed to keep my promise. Something about that answer stayed with Clara, a man who still honored a promise made years ago. That was rare. But as Daniel and Clara grew closer, not everyone was happy, especially Henry Wallace. Henry had known Clara for years. He believed he was protecting her. One afternoon, he saw Daniel leaving Clara's farm. Later, he stopped her near the road. Be careful, Clara sighed. About what? That man, you barely know him. I know enough. Henry looked serious. Men like him come and go. Clara looked at him. And what if he does not? Henry had no answer. Because the truth was, neither did Clara. That night she sat alone beside the fireplace. For years she had been afraid of loneliness. Now she was afraid of something else. Hope. Because hope meant she had something to lose again. And Clara Bennett was not sure her heart could survive another goodbye. For the first time in many years, Clara Bennett found herself looking forward to tomorrow, and that frightened her, because she knew what happened when people started hoping. They started dreaming. And dreams could be taken away. She had learned that lesson when she lost Thomas. But Daniel Carter was different. He never tried to rush into her life. He never promised things he could not guarantee. He simply showed up, and somehow that meant more than any grand words. One cold morning, Clara was carrying supplies from town when the handle of her wagon broke. She tried fixing it herself. Of course she did. That was what she always did. But after several attempts, she sat down and sighed. Having trouble, she looked up. Daniel stood nearby with a small smile. Clara shook her head. I had it under control. Daniel looked at the broken handle. Of course you did. She raised an eyebrow. Are you making fun of me? Not at all, he smiled. I have learned something about you. What? You say you do not need help right before you accept help. For a moment, Clara wanted to argue, but she realized he was right. So instead, she smiled, a real smile, the kind she had forgotten she still had. As Daniel repaired the wagon, Clara watched him carefully. There was no rush in his movements, no need to prove himself. He simply worked. When he finished, Clara handed him some coins. Daniel immediately shook his head. No, you worked for it. I did not help you because I wanted money. Then why? Daniel looked at her. Because someone once helped me when I needed it. Clara became quiet. Who? My wife. He looked toward the road. When Emily and I first started our life together, we had almost nothing. A stranger helped us build our first home. He smiled softly. Emily always said kindness has a way of coming back when you least expect it. Clara looked at him. And do you believe that? Daniel nodded. I do now. The friendship between Clara and Daniel continued to grow, but neither of them spoke about what they were feeling. They were both carrying old wounds, both afraid to step forward. One evening, Daniel found Clara sitting alone outside her farmhouse. The sun was disappearing behind the mountains. You look like someone thinking about something important. Clara smiled slightly. I was remembering who I used to be. Daniel sat beside her. Who was that? Someone who believed anything was possible. And now, she looked down. Now I know life does not always give people what they want. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then he asked, do you think that means people should stop wanting? Clara looked at him. I think people should learn when to let go. Daniel nodded slowly. Maybe. Then he looked toward the fields. But maybe some things are not meant to be let go. His words stayed with Clara long after he left. A few days later, something happened that changed everything. A strong storm hit Willow Creek. The wind damaged several farms. Clara rushed outside when she heard part of her barn collapse. She ran toward it, but before she could move the fallen wood, Daniel arrived. Clara, she turned. What are you doing here? I heard the storm damaged your farm. I can handle it. Daniel looked at the broken barn. I know you can. He stepped closer. But you should not have to handle everything alone. Those words hit harder than he expected, because they were not only about the barn, they were about her entire life. Together they worked through the storm. Hours later they sat on her porch, exhausted. Rain continued falling around them. Clara looked at Daniel. "Why do you care so much?" Daniel thought about the question, then he answered honestly, "Because I know what it feels like when nobody notices you are struggling." Clara looked away. Because she knew exactly what he meant. That night, Clara opened a small drawer beside her bed. Inside was an old photograph of Thomas. She held it carefully. For years, she felt guilty whenever she imagined loving someone else, as if happiness after loss meant she had forgotten the person she lost. But Daniel made her question that belief. Maybe love was not something that disappeared, maybe it changed. Maybe the love Thomas gave her helped her become the person she was today. But just when Clara began allowing herself to believe in something new, Daniel received unexpected news. He found a letter containing information about Emily's sister. She was alive. And she was living several towns away. Daniel had finally found the person he had searched for. When he told Clara, she smiled. "That is wonderful." Daniel looked at her. "I may have to leave for a while." The smile disappeared from her face for just a moment, but she quickly hid it. "Of course," Daniel noticed. "You are disappointed." "No, Clara," she looked at him, "you have a promise to keep." Daniel was silent because she was right, but he also realized something. Leaving had become harder than he expected. Before leaving, Daniel visited Clara one final time. He stood outside her house holding the wooden box. "I wanted to say goodbye." Clara forced a smile. "Goodbyes are not always forever." Daniel looked at her. "Do you believe that?" She hesitated. "I am trying to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said, "When I came here, I thought I was only searching for someone from my past." Clara looked at him. "But I found someone who reminded me I still had a future." Her eyes became emotional. "Daniel," he shook his head gently. "Do not answer." "Why?" "Because some things should not be rushed." He stepped back. "I will return when I finish what I started." Clara nodded, but after he left, she wondered one thing. Would he really come back, or was this just another person life was taking away from her? The weeks passed, then months. Clara continued living her life, but she was different now. She started teaching children in town. She spent more time with friends. She laughed more. People noticed. The woman who once seemed like she had given up was becoming herself again. But sometimes, when the sun set over the fields, she still looked toward the road, waiting, not because she needed Daniel to be happy, but because she wanted to know if what they shared was real. Then one evening, a familiar horse appeared near her farmhouse. Clara stood frozen, because after all those months, Daniel Carter had returned, but something was different. The look on his face told her that he had not come back only to visit. He had come back with a decision that could change both of their lives forever. Clara stood on her porch, unable to move. For months, she had imagined this moment. Sometimes she imagined Daniel returning with good news. Sometimes she imagined him never coming back at all. But now that he was standing in front of her, she realized something. She was not the same woman who had watched him ride away. Back then, she was afraid of losing him. Now she understood that her happiness could not depend on whether someone stayed or left. Daniel removed his hat. "Hello, Clara," she smiled softly. "Hello, Daniel." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Clara noticed something. The wooden box was gone. "You found her," Daniel nodded. "I did." They sat on the porch as the evening sky turned orange. Daniel told her everything. Emily's sister was alive. She had built a family of her own. She was happy. And when Daniel delivered the letters, she cried, not because she was sad, because she finally understood how much Emily had loved her. "I kept my promise," Daniel said. Clara smiled. "You must feel relieved." "I do." He looked at the fields, "but I realized something after I finished." "What?" Daniel looked back at her. "I spent years believing my life ended when Emily died." Clara stayed silent. "But I was wrong." He took a breath. "Her love was not the end of my story. It was part of it." Those words touched Clara deeply because she had been carrying the same fear. I used to think moving forward meant leaving Thomas behind, Clara admitted. Daniel looked at her. And now I know that is not true, she smiled. The people we love become part of who we are, Daniel nodded. Exactly, for the first time they both understood. They were not replacing the people they lost. They were honoring them by continuing to live, but Daniel had one more thing to say, and this time he looked nervous. A man who had crossed miles of wilderness looked more uncertain than Clara had ever seen him. What is it? Daniel smiled slightly. I came back because I realized something. Clara waited. I missed this place. He looked around. I missed this farm. Then he looked at her. But most of all, he paused. I missed you. Clara looked down. The words she once dreamed of hearing now felt almost too much, because she knew love was not just about happiness. Love required courage. You know what people say about me, Daniel frowned. I do not care what people say. They say I am too old. Daniel stepped closer. They are wrong. Clara looked at him. How do you know? Because I have seen your heart, he smiled. I have seen your kindness, your strength, your patience, your courage. He shook his head. None of those things have an age. News of Daniel's return spread quickly through Willow Creek. And as expected, people talked. Some were surprised, some questioned them, but something had changed. Clara no longer listened to every voice around her. Because she finally understood that a person's worth was not decided by other people's opinions. One afternoon, Henry Wallace visited her farm, the same man who once warned her about Daniel. Clara expected another lecture. Instead, Henry looked embarrassed. I owe you an apology. Clara looked surprised. For what? I thought I was protecting you. He looked toward the road. But really, I was only afraid. Afraid of what? Henry smiled sadly. That people like us are too old to begin again. Clara understood, because she had felt that fear too. You are never too old to change your life, Henry nodded. I wish I had learned that sooner. A few months later, Clara and Daniel married quietly. There was no huge celebration, no grand ceremony. Just the people who truly cared about them. The same town that once whispered about Clara now watched her smile beside Daniel. They saw something they did not expect. Not a woman who had found love because she needed saving, but a woman who had found someone who respected the life she had already built. Daniel did not complete Clara, she was already complete. He simply walked beside her. Years passed. The little farmhouse became a place where people gathered. Children came to learn from Clara, travelers stopped by to rest. Neighbors visited for conversations and coffee. The house that once felt empty was full again. One evening, Clara and Daniel sat together on the porch. The same porch where they had once talked about fear and loneliness. Daniel looked at her. Do you remember when you told me life does not always give people what they want? Clara smiled. I remember. I think you were right. She looked at him. You do, Daniel nodded. Life does not always give us what we want. He held her hand. Sometimes it gives us something we never thought we could have. Clara looked toward the sunset, and she smiled, because years ago she believed her best days were behind her. She believed love belonged to younger people. She believed some doors closed forever. But she learned the truth. A heart does not count years, it counts moments, it counts kindness. It counts the courage to try again, and sometimes the greatest love story begins after we thought the story was already over.